Good afternoon, everybody. I wish I could see you. I'm looking at a lot of lights here. Weren't those women absolutely amazing? So I'm going to assume that all of the young people here today are here because they have merit. Because if you didn't have merit, I don't think you would have been invited here. So I'm going to assume that you're starting off, the material here is special. The only reason that I have the privilege to be invited to come and speak to you here today, and I wouldn't even say I have the right to speak to you, it's simply that it's a privilege. The only reason I have that is because of One Young World, which has become in 4 short years the world's premier youth leadership forum, gathers 196 countries together, more countries than any other youth organization other than the Olympic Games. But One Young World has its own story. It is absolutely about leaders and the search for leaders. So I was asked to speak to you briefly today about inspiration and leadership and courage, and to introduce somebody very special. And I'd just like to deal with those things, but I think when you've had a fantastic day like you've had today, and you've heard people like Chris, seen Mary, listen to the utterly amazing Margaret Aspinall, I think it's lots and lots of things. And I think sometimes I'm so humbled by these people who have taken massive tragedy and incredible injustice and formed it into strength and grown their community spirit and shown honesty and integrity and truthfulness in the face of governments and police forces that have none of these things. But not everybody is so I think, ill-gotten as to have one of these tragedies before them, thank God. I have not suffered myself any such tragedy in my life. And I sometimes think, does it take that scale of tragedy to find the leader, to find the Nelson Mandela, who for his 32 years in prison emerged Nelson Mandela? So what are those things? And I'd like to say to all of you who've been here today, and to prepare the platform for the speakers you're going to see after me, who really are people of great leadership, is to get you to focus down on these 3 things: inspiration, leadership, and courage. You have seen inspiration here today. Your minds have registered the rational of the inspiration. I'm sure when you listen to someone like Margaret Aspinall, to Chris, you feel the inspiration here in your gut. But I ask all of you, each of you young people of merit, to take from today an inspiration that you take with you for the rest of your lives till you're as old as I am. Take that inspiration every day. Interrogate it, analyze it, question yourself. What is it going to mean for you? Because this is when you do the workshop on yourself. What does it mean, and what are you going to do? It is not enough for any of us to be inspired, nor to understand leadership. My quest with One Young World has been literally about leaders. And the inspiration is very simply this. In 1984, in apartheid South Africa, I read a tiny little article in Time magazine that said something to the effect of Archbishop Desmond Tutu had saved a young man from being necklaced in a township in the eastern province of South Africa. Those of you who don't know, being necklaced means somebody takes a used car tire, fills it with petrol, puts it around your neck, and lights the petrol. And this had become a practice in South Africa that the people, the oppressed people, used to mark an informer and to kill and maim informers who had informed on them to the apartheid regime. Understandable, yes. But mob justice is not justice, because who said the guy was an informer? Desmond Tutu had jumped out of a car in the middle of a mob that were intent of necklacing a man. And those of you who know Desmond Tutu will know he's that big. Had jumped out of a car, stopped the mob, and stopped them necklacing this man. That's an incredible thing. And in those dark days of apartheid South Africa, it was a brave, brave thing. You stood a seriously good chance. Desmond Tutu could have been stamped on and burnt in a matter of seconds. And I read this tiny little article and I thought, God, what a thing. Imagine doing a thing like that. But it's never left me. And it's irritated me like a stone in a shoe. It has never left me. And many years later, I had asked somebody please to find for me the footage of that instance, because of course in apartheid Africa, there was no chance, South Africa, there was no chance we would have been able to see film footage of what had happened there. And this footage, and I urge you to look at it, it's in the BBC archives, it's very easy to get hold of, is almost biblical. It's like a scene from a Scorsese movie. This tiny little man wrestling in the dust and rescuing this man who may or may not have been an informer. And Tutu himself won't talk about the incident. And when I finally had the privilege of meeting him, I said to him, well, Father, you know, what on earth did you think you were doing? He won't say, he just says, but I was doing what was right. So against the run of context, against the perceived wisdom of people, he went in the other direction. And coming from apartheid South Africa as I do, and knowing Desmond Tutu, and knowing the story of Nelson Mandela, and knowing what those two men did for South Africa, I have always looked at the world and gone, where are those people? I look at some of the situations in the world today, and with my very good friend Kofi Annan, I really do ask, who will save these people? Where are the leaders? And I wish that I felt in all humility that I was seeing leaders. Not so much. Not so much. Why? Why? Because leadership is all of your merit taken, inspired, distilled down, focused, and take it out there every single day. That said, leadership is a particular thing, and it cannot accept the status quo. I was at a UN Women's Lunch Roundtable Forum a couple of days ago. It's amazing Phumzile from South Africa, who's the leader currently of UN Women. Amazing contributions around the table, but one contribution that said, oh, it's not about leadership, it's about the grassroots. Because Michelle Bachelet had been the leader of UN Women, but when she went back to Chile, she couldn't speak out about topic X because she is now the leader of a country and her hands were tied. No, she's not the leader of the country. She may yet show to be a leader. She is the president of that country. What's the difference here? Here is the difference. I, as a humble citizen, without the grace and the leadership quality and the courage of a Margaret Aspinall, have to ask, as a tax-paying citizen, I have to ask, is it so that a political leader's hands are tied? Really? No, your hands are not tied. You're just worried about whether you get elected next time or not. Your hands are not tied. And I felt so strongly at this lunch that I said, just hold the phone. When Nelson Mandela came out of prison, his hands were tied by his party. The ANC were expecting certain steps and certain statements. He didn't make any of them. His hands were not tied. A leader's hands are not tied. Nelson Mandela looked at the ties, the rules, the self-interest, and it is self-interest, the self-interest and said, my hands are not tied. Parker Lioto, who you heard earlier today, our first One Young World Explorer, Parker said to me a few weeks ago, I don't want to believe that this fight against the impact of about the impact of climate change is being held back only because of the self-interest of political leaders. But Kate, I'm beginning to think that it is. So, okay, let's park that. They're politicians, they're not leaders. Where does this leadership thing comes from? Where this courage, where this strength? I don't know. I just absolutely don't know. But I looked at Desmond Tutu and I went, we have to find these people, and One Young World is about that thing. I believe with people like Parker, and there are other ambassadors here today, I believe, and I have to believe this, that we are starting to find these young leaders with all the advantages that Chris was talking about, the most informed, the most educated, and the most connected generation in human history. And it's my work to find them. And I ask the young leaders at One Young World every single year, and when I see them individually, I'm looking for Nelson Mandela. Is it you? And I say to all of you here today with merit, please ask yourselves, is it you? Is it you? Maybe it's you. And we have to find these people. You've seen some of them here today. And what defines so many of these leaders for me is this courage that knows no binding of the hands. So often, a courage exposed in tragedy. But you can't, and I pray for you all, have tragedy. So dig deep, find there. Some of you have that special courage to live against the tide and to say to yourselves and ask yourselves all the time, not is it legal? Not is it legal? Just ask, is it right? You know if it's right. It doesn't matter if it's legal or not. You know the difference between right and wrong. The bankers that ran off with all the money, legal? Yes. Right? No, not right. May I just have the mic to introduce the next speaker? So, here comes courage in the face of potential tragedy. Here comes courage and a moment in time taken into leadership. Here comes one of the most courageous people this great country of the United Kingdom has ever produced. I'm honored to meet her so briefly. You're going to meet her for longer now. And I, like you, will listen and dig deep to feel this courage in my gut. Here's Katie Piper.